Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the show. We're all human, and sometimes pure altruism just isn't enough to get us wanting to do charitable work. But from improving empathy to honing new skills, today we're going to uncover why giving back isn't just good for others, but it's also the best thing that you can do for yourself. And leading us in this discussion is Karen Knight, who has been providing volunteer engagement advice, mentoring and training for social impact organizations for over 25 years. Hi, Karen. It's lovely having you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Marie. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. So I'm curious to know, in your line of work, what's the most common challenge you've witnessed among your clients?
Probably the challenge that they come to me with tends to be we don't have enough volunteers. They're trying to make this big impact in the world, and you need volunteers to be able to do that. And they're saying, we just don't have enough.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's a great introduction to our topic for today. But before we get further in a detail, we'd like to get to know you better. This is Have You Met Karen Knight? So what do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, as I think you can see behind me, I read a lot. I read an awful lot. It's how I learn. It is how I entertain myself. It's my comfort.
That's great, because my next question was going to be, what is a favorite book of yours?
Oh, that's hard. I have different favorite books depending on my mood, on how I'm feeling in a particular day.
Oh yeah, totally fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have over 2,000 books in my paper library. I don't know how many I have on my devices, but
My God.
some of my favorites. I love Out of Africa. The book Out of Africa is amazing. It has so many word pictures in it that it just draws me right in, and the story is wonderful. But yeah, I could sit here and name off dozens.
So what's the story about?
Out of Africa
Yeah.
is a story about a woman. It's a nonfiction. It's a travel log, I guess, of a woman who moved from Denmark to Africa and had a coffee farm. And she raised coffee, and all the challenges that she had, both with her business, with other Europeans in the country, and in this was in Kenya, near Nairobi. And yeah, just it isn't so much a continuous story as just a whole bunch of little stories of things that happened to her. So it's just delightful and so well written.
It sounds really nice, and I do enjoy books where it's like short little stories here and there, because it also makes it a bit more digestible, I find. I don't know if anyone else has this issue, but I tend to get distracted like halfway through a book or something, and I just want to get to the end, and I always skip to the end. So short stories sounds right up my alley. Are there any films that you enjoy?
probably my favorite film. I don't watch films all that often, but I tend to lean toward the comedies. And probably my favorite one is Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail.
Oh,
I love
I've never watched it. What is
Haven't
it
you?
about?
Oh, for
No,
you.
yeah.
It's a very, very goofy thing. It was a cult film for quite a while. I don't know if it's still considered one, but it's the quest for the Holy Grail, like King Arthur's quest for the Holy Grail, but in the goofiest manner that you could possibly imagine.
Oh, that
It's
sounds really fun, actually.
and it's some of it is just plain silly, and some of it you realize how funny it is later. After you think about it for a while, it's delightful. Another one I like is The Princess Bride, which is it's a similar.
It's another
type
one
of-
that I haven't watched, but I've heard of. So, yeah, maybe I just haven't watched enough films.
or just not the weird ones that I watch. One of the two.
Maybe. Do you listen to any podcasts?
I listen to industry podcasts in the social impact sector. So one of my favorites is Rod Jackson's Advancing the Profession. That's probably my favorite podcast.
What do you like about it?
Rob is number one. He's been in the industry for years in the volunteer area of the social impact sector. Been in it for decades, and he has so much knowledge, and he has connections everywhere. So he brings in guests who really knows things. So when I always learn when I listen to him,
That sounds
just insights and ideas.
That sounds really informative, and I think I might want to check it out. I do love podcasts that give you this bunch of information that you wouldn't otherwise get anywhere else, or you take a lot more time trying to dig up. It's really a value add, I find. Thank you so much for answering my questions. And now we move on to the interview section. My first question is, how would you define personal development?
Any way that you can help yourself grow is personal development. And it can be in any aspect of your life. If you can teach yourself to floss every day, floss your teeth every day, that's personal development. If you can teach yourself a new language, that's personal development. If you can, any way you can improve yourself, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, any way where you can put time and effort into making yourself a better person, that's self-development. And it's vital.
That's a great answer. And in your experience, what are some of the main challenges that one would face in pursuit of personal growth?
I can tell you the one I hear the most, and that is, I don't have the time. And yet it's funny when you actually talk to somebody about where they spend their time, it tends to be things like, oh, binge watching on Netflix or this, or just hanging out with friends. These are things, I mean, hanging out with friends is important, and I don't discount that in any way. But you can hang out with friends and all learn together. There's ways that you can all invest in self-development in a fun and group environment.
Yeah.
The binge watching on Netflix, yeah, you can set that aside a little bit to learn a few things that'll make your world better.
Yeah, that's actually something that I wanted to discuss with you about, because I feel like it is a very common challenge that people find themselves facing when considering volunteer work. Just things like, I don't have the time. And some of it might be true. But
we're going to put a pin in that because I wanted to also ask you, more importantly, how would you define volunteering?
Volunteering is helping other people, and that without expectation of monetary reward. Really, you notice I say monetary reward. Anytime you volunteer, you will get something out of it every single time. It may not come in the form of money, but growth, learning, relationships, dozens of different things. And it's okay to go into a volunteering position with the expectation that you're going to learn a new skill or you want to build relationships. You can have those kind of expectations. You just don't expect to get money out of it. But volunteering, it's all about helping people or the planet or society in general. It's just giving your time.
Yeah, that's really true. And what is the importance of volunteering? Is there another activity that can reap you the benefits that volunteering does?
Not that I know of, honestly, really. I've been volunteering since I was 11 years old. I went to visit my grandmother in her care home, and the person who was supposed to call bingo didn't show up that day. And everybody was upset because nobody wanted to call it themselves because then they couldn't play. So I said, well, all you have to do is pull these balls out of the basket and read them off. That's all I have to do. And so I called bingo for an afternoon, and they were so incredibly grateful. And they showered me with hugs and kisses and cookies and candy and all this sort of thing. And I thought, wow, this volunteering thing, this is a really good deal.
Yeah.
And then I just kept doing it. And I got to the point where I felt so good about myself. I felt proud of myself for what I was doing to help. And I could look and see that I was making a difference in the world. I mean, not just in the care home, but I've been volunteering ever since in many, many different areas. And when you see the change that you can make, there's no feeling like it. And on top of that, I've made connections that have gotten me promotions at work and better jobs. I've got skill sets that I would never have had I could never have imagined receiving. There are just so many things.
That's amazing. And can I just say that I don't think I've ever met someone else as passionate as you are about volunteering. And it's really nice to see. You bring this emotion into it that is so infectious. And I can feel every word that you say. Yeah, but going back to the interview. So again, I think we addressed this at the start of the episode. I just want to bring the discussion back to the challenges that people might face when wanting to volunteer. And one of the top reasons for not volunteering is just a lack of time. So let's discuss that. What advice do you have for people who feel like they just don't have time on their hands? What are some things that people can do to set that time aside? Is there something they can do to reframe that mindset of like putting aside binge watching Netflix and things like that?
There's a couple of things, and one of it actually is more advice for the organizations who are looking for volunteers. There is a trend in volunteering right now toward people who want to volunteer toward not committing for years and years and years. Oh, previously somebody would start volunteering and then they'd volunteer for the next 20 years and doing the same role all the time. And that just doesn't happen anymore, or very, very rarely. just as the same as when my parents were young, they got out of high school, they got a job, and they stayed with that same company until they retired. Nobody does that anymore. Our world is far more mobile.
Yeah.
And so I recommend to organizations, if any of people like that are listening, is find ways to engage people in short-term projects. Don't expect people to want to commit for years and years and years. So take that back to the volunteers themselves. It is okay to go to an organization or some sort of format that is important to you, and that's huge. Make sure you donate your time to a cause that you're already passionate about, and if you're passionate about it already, you'll find the time. It's easier that way. But even if you just don't have the time, if you do shift work or you're all in and out and you can't commit, just go to the organization and say, listen, I've got 2 hours this week. Is there anything you can have me do? I can't guarantee I'll come back. I can't do anything, but I've got 2 hours this week. Can you fit me in anywhere?
Just like that.
Just like that. And good organizations will find something. It may not be elaborate or sexy in any way. It might be, listen, we've got this mountain of paper that needs to be shredded. Can you do it? Right? It'll save our admin time, because then she or he could do other work that otherwise would get left. Right? Little things. They may have, oh yeah, that's perfect. We're cleaning up a stream or a beach. Maybe you can come out that day and help for 2 hours.
Yeah, and maybe the friends that you are so busy hanging out with, you could rope in to do some of these, because it's also, you get to bond with your friends. And I know how it feels, because personally I've had this, I relate to the battle of like, oh, I want to do volunteer work, but there's no one to hold me accountable. No one in my life does it. And so when that is out of my life and just out of my periphery, I just completely forget about it. So getting people that are actually in your life to come with you and volunteer could be a great way of kind of, I don't want to say holding yourself accountable, because it sounds too serious for something like that. Like, it really isn't that grave or dire or anything, but it's just a nice thing to do. So you did mention, yeah, you did mention that, one of the things that people could do is to find something they are passionate in. And animal shelters, hospitals, and soup kitchens are some of the common volunteering activities. I'm curious if there are any lesser known volunteering opportunities that you've come across that people might be interested in and maybe don't know about.
I'm on the board of directors for a therapeutic riding association. We need people to lead horses around where children with disabilities may need help staying in the saddle or just having someone lead them around because they can't control the horse themselves. That's one that comes to mind easily for me because I'm involved in that. There's advocacy, lots and lots of organizations, especially those who are dealing with people with disabilities or with mental health challenges, or any advocacy is huge. And it's a really helpful one because it makes a big difference on a broad scale. And on top of that, most of that you can do from your home. It can be done remotely. Volunteering doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to a place and do things. You could, if you love posting on social media, hook up with an organization that needs someone to post on their social media platforms once or twice a week, right? Some of these things are really, really simple. And you don't even have to go to an organization. If you want to volunteer, just look around. I mean, I'm in Canada. I'm in British Columbia. We get snow. And my son, my 19-year-old son, we have a neighbor who's a senior. He just goes out and shovels his driveway for him, right?
Yeah.
That's volunteering too. You don't have to go to an organization. Just
Yeah.
find someone who needs help and help them. That's
That
all
actually,
they do.
that actually reminds me of this volunteering thing that my friend does. I didn't really register it as volunteering before because she's never used the words volunteering. But now I'm thinking of it and I think it's volunteering. And I know the suspense is killing people, I'm sure, because I'm going on about this thing that I mentioned sounds like volunteering, but wasn't described as volunteering. But essentially, so there's this mental health organization here in Australia called Beyond Blue, and they do these events called Blue Table. And so I think anyone can sign up to be a volunteer or something like that. And you get like this set of cards and place cards, and I'm not describing this very well, but you get a set of like of mental health cards and mental health documents essentially. And the volunteer hosts a blue table at their home. They invite people that they know, their family, their friends, and they get them to bring um, a comfort food of theirs, and they sit down and talk about mental health and talk about depression, anxiety, and that kind of spreads the awareness in a very small way, but very impactful, because I feel like smaller things like that, especially if you are talking to people that you already know, tend to be a bit more impactful and just more memorable than, let's say, if you were to go to like a big convention about depression and anxiety. It's a bit closer to your heart. And then people can scan a QR code and donate to Beyond Blue to help support the cause. And that's a really nice way of it's kind of volunteering in a way, because you are helping raise money for a charity organization, without really doing anything that's out of your ordinary activity. You know, you'd be hosting a dinner or a lunch at your place on the weekends anyway, if you do that. So it's it's an easy way to integrate some of that into your life, you know, baby steps a little bit. If you aren't comfortable with going out there and cleaning up trash on the beach, maybe that's not something that you typically do, and you don't want to force yourself to do something that you wouldn't normally do. That's something that you can consider. Yeah.
That absolutely is volunteering. You reminded me too of another thing that I've seen done is you started talking about cards. An organization I know here in Canada, they have these cards. They're a disability organization, and they say on each card is a bit of a challenge, like blindfold yourself, go into your bathroom and brush your teeth without seeing anything. How do you know you've got the right toothbrush? This is just to bring awareness of what someone who has a disability is going through, and then post about it on social media. How did it go? So they've made absolute huge strides in getting this. Some of these have gone viral. People talking about, how I tied my shoes with only one hand. Little things, right? And it just makes such a big difference. And that's volunteering too, right?
Yeah.
You teach yourself, I mean, talk about personal growth. You teach yourself and you share your learning with other people, and you advocate for a cause.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I think like probably part of it is also like reframing what volunteering is, because when people hear the word volunteer, volunteering, they tend to think about going to a physical building and, like, I don't know, handing out food in a little canteen or something. Um, but that's not all that volunteering is. It doesn't stop there. And there are small little things that you can do if you don't have the time to go and hand out food to the needy. There are other things that you can do for your community, and there are other things that you might be more passionate about that you might actually do on a weekly or regular basis. So to end things off, what final piece of advice would you like to give to those people who'd like to start engaging in volunteering but aren't sure where to start?
And I go back to the find what you're passionate about. I mean, if you are huge into the environment, find a area near you, or arrange a group thing on your own. Like I said, volunteering does not require you to belong to an organization. If you see trash around your neighborhood and environment is important to you, get a bunch of friends together and go pick trash.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's pretty simple, but find what's something that really speaks to you, because if you do that, then you'll want to do it, right? Then you won't be making excuses. Oh, I don't want to do this. If you're into kids, if you're into animals, if you're into helping seniors, if you're into sports, there's 1,000 different ways you can volunteer. There's 1,000 different areas you can volunteer in. Find what you're passionate about.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, if you do find something that you're passionate about and you go and volunteer, the relationships that you built there are also more meaningful because they share the same passions as you, and they could end up being some of your lifelong friends or friends outside of just volunteering. So it could offer you more than just feeling good about giving back to your community. Um, so now moving on to the practice slash habits section. What is a habit that you practice in order to support your personal growth when you're volunteering? Is there something that you ask yourself on a daily basis? Do you debrief with yourself and go over reflect on what you've done?
Probably the thing that I do pretty well every time I go to a volunteering event or volunteer in some way is I walk in there with the mindset, today I'm going to learn something, right? Whether it's how to hold a snow shovel properly or anything, or I'm going to talk to one of the volunteers I'm working with and learn something new about them. So I always go in thinking, what am I going to learn today? Right? Because that's me. I mean, I love to learn. I love learning new things and having insights into things that it's massive to me. It's not for everybody, but that's the one thing I do is what am I going to learn today? It doesn't have to be big. It can be some small little thing, but just something. I'm going to learn something today, and I'm going to be happy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. And does that kind of set your mind up for like that eagerness and the enthusiasm to go and volunteer too? Because it does sound like that would have that effect on me, and it's something that I've never really thought of doing. I tend to do the opposite thing, which is like I'll go home and I'll reflect. What have I learned today? It might have been a bad day, but I have learned something out of this. It's like next time, do this instead, or what's not. So essentially I do the opposite thing, but it sounds like that does set your mind up a little bit.
It does,
Yeah.
and you start looking for the learning opportunities.
Yeah.
I find if I think about it later, I can find things, but if I go there looking for something to learn, I'll always find it.
Yeah,
Right?
and I also just imagine putting myself in your position. I'm just imagining it's also going to give me a lot more patience when I look at things. Like if they go wrong, I've already set my mind up for this learning experience. So I'll remember that when something goes wrong or something that would usually irritate me. If that happens, then I'll remember and my mind's prepped. So that's what I'm imagining that experience to be. Are there any challenges in doing this practice? Are there days where you just go like, I don't want to learn anything? you know?
If I'm not feeling well, or if I've had a rough day out before I go there, it can be hard to do. Sometimes, depending on what your volunteer role is or what you're doing that particular day, sometimes it can be really hard. There are some really, really challenging volunteer roles out there. Working on a child abuse hotline, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can learn things I don't know that I want to. Right? There are things I just don't want to know more about. I just know that I'm making, that's when I fall back on, I know I'm making a difference, right? Even if it's only for a short time or whatever, I'm what I'm doing is important to the world. So, and especially to this one person.
And would you recommend this practice to everyone?
If you are into learning, it's a wonderful practice. If you're not, if you are into, I just want to go and make a difference, focus on that. But set yourself up before you go in that you are going to get what you're there for. Right? If you go in with the expectation that I'm going to learn, I'm going to build new relationships, I'm going to make a difference in the world. If you go in with that expectation, it'll happen. So that would be my particular way, maybe not, but I recommend people set themselves up before they go in each time that today I'm going to meet someone new, or I'm going to learn something new, or whatever your passion is. I'm huge on passion. Find what's passionate, what you're passionate about, and work toward
like
that.
a little realistic pep talk before you go out there and start your day. Sometimes pep talks might not work because of the language you're using, but if you tell yourself like, oh, this is happening today, this is happening today, instead of like, oh, it's going to be a great day, you can do this and that's it. I think that makes a world of difference, because it's like you are in fact going to do these things that you plan to do today. So you're not really setting yourself up for failure. In fact, you're just prepping yourself a bit for the kind of difference that you're going to make. Yeah. So thank you so much for answering my questions. Now we'll move on to questions from the audience. We don't have many today, if I'm being honest, but someone wants to know, how can people strike a balance between volunteering and self-care to ensure that they don't get any burnout or suffer from an overcommitment?
That's huge, and I've seen that happen where somebody goes into an organization, especially organizations that are dealing with traumatic events, or people who are experiencing trauma. You have to be able to put a barrier. It sounds awful. You want to be fully there for everyone, but you do need to protect yourself and try not to take on the pain that they have. Be there for them, but don't do it for them, if that makes sense. And be aware, learn about what burnout and compassion fatigue look like in the early stages, and monitor yourself for it. If you find you're coming home from a shift and you're not sleeping because you keep thinking about this story you heard, that tells you it's time to take a break. You don't have to stop volunteering for the organization altogether. You can say, listen, I'm reaching my limit for this. Can I just work in the office for a couple shifts? And then when I'm better, I can go back. Then most organizations are really welcoming to that. They want you to protect yourself because they don't want you to burn out. They don't want you to altogether quit and leave, which is what happens if you push yourself right to the limit.
Yeah.
So just stay aware of how you're reacting to what's going on.
That's
and just
really
know
good advice.
what you have.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Have you ever suffered from burnout or overcommitment?
Overcommitment, not so much burnout. I've had this is something I advise my clients who are not-for-profit organizations. I advise them, don't get desperate. And once you find a good volunteer, make sure you don't overwhelm them, because organizations have a tendency to find a superstar volunteer and then they give them more and more and more and more and more and more. And for the longest time, I had a hard time saying no. So when they said, oh, you're doing this and you're doing such a fantastic job, can you do this too? I would say yes, because they needed it.
Yeah.
They really needed it. And I didn't want to say no.
It's hard saying no when you're passionate about it and you genuinely want to do it. But you need to know what your capacity is. So do you have any advice for how to prevent that?
Learn to say no. And that's a lot easier said than done. But be aware that it's better to do 50% for a long period of time than 100% for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Right? You make a bigger difference over the long run by putting these boundaries in place and saying, no, I can't do that as well. Or, yes, I can do that, but somebody else has to do this other piece then. Right? You last longer, you feel better, and the organization itself benefits because you're more likely to stay around longer.
And it's also a learning experience for being assertive and being assertive in a kind way to, not just being like, no, I don't want to do this stuff, but in a way of like, well, I'd really love to do it. However, I can't handle that at the moment. If someone does this that I was meant to do, I can definitely help with this, so on and so forth. Just like learning a bit of that kind of language. It can be a learning opportunity as well. Our next question is, are there any smaller acts of kindness or micro volunteering opportunities that can produce the same effect as volunteering? And I think we spoke about this earlier on, but we didn't manage to go into much detail. So, yeah.
Just look around your neighborhood. Is there someone with mobility issues who needs the leaves raked in their yard? Or is there someone, you've got extra fruit and vegetables, can you donate them? You see somebody by the side of the road, pull over, do you need help? I mean, that's volunteering. People don't think of it as volunteering. They just think of it as helping. But helping is volunteering.
You know what?
So there's tons.
That is so true. I actually I received volunteer work from someone this morning, which is a weird thing to say because I wouldn't have thought of it that way otherwise. But essentially, as you know, there was a lot of rain in Melbourne this morning, and I was waiting at a tram stop which didn't have a shelter or a roof, and I forgot to bring my umbrella out, and I was just standing there in the rain waiting for the tram, completely not expecting anyone to bother whatsoever, because it's like 9-ish in the morning, and everyone just wants to protect themselves, it's like whatever. And without saying anything, this stranger comes up to me and just puts their umbrella over my head without even saying a word. And I only realized when I was like, hey, has the rain stopped? And I looked around and there this person was just like smiling at me. And I was like, oh, how nice. And that made my day. That genuinely made my day. And it was only for like 30 seconds to a minute maybe, but makes all the difference in someone's day. So you could
It
do
does
that.
it.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee, because I've been in a similar situation, that person felt just as good about it as you did, because they made your day.
Mhm.
And when you make somebody else's day, it makes your own day, right?
Mhm.
It's brilliant. And yes, that is volunteering.
Volunteer work. Yeah. Now we'll move on to the open mic section. This is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. But if you wanted to go on about volunteering and say something that we haven't covered yet, by all means do it. So yeah, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Yeah, well, as you can tell, I am rather passionate about volunteering and everything involved with volunteering. Um,
I had an
volunteer
inkling.
Yeah, that and reading. Those are the two big passions in my life. I mean, I'm married. I have a 19-year-old son. I have a 3-year-old dog who's more hassle than he's worth sometimes. Other times he's incredible. I'm passionate about my family too. But there's very little that will get me talking like volunteering. It is just something that has made such a difference in my life in so many different ways, in more ways than you can possibly imagine. Like I said, career-wise, relationship-wise, knowledge-wise, experiences-wise. It's just something that if you haven't done it, if you haven't experienced it, then you should just try, even just a little bit, even if it's just holding an umbrella over somebody, and just get a taste of what that satisfaction in you feels like, and
Yeah.
know that the more you do it, the bigger that satisfaction is. It's just incredible.
I think also the way that you have framed volunteering is very different from the way we were not really forced, but how it was mandatory when we were in primary school or high school. It's very different from that because that was like part of our curriculum. And I feel like depending on what teacher you have, they don't necessarily prep you for these things. You just kind of are told that this is something good to do, and then you just do it. But as an adult, and you can think for yourself now, there are ways to make that experience more fulfilling, and it's going to be very different than the one that you had as a child. Because also, they had to cater to a class of people and not just one person. So,
Right. And let's face it, if you are told to do it, it's not volunteering.
yeah, that's not volunteering.
Right?
It's not
You may not
counted.
get paid, but
Yeah.
it's not volunteering to do your math homework either.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not volunteering if you have to do it, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Is there is there a volunteering experience in particular that has really struck a chord with you, or something that is a favorite of yours, is just so memorable and that you'll always hold close to your hearts? I really want to know, and I want to hear what's that one experience that you had that's really
Though
did something.
probably, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but how I got into volunteering in the
Yeah.
first place.
Yes, I remember that one.
That experience probably stands out the most, mostly because it was the first one, and it really showed me what volunteering can do for a person, like for the volunteer. Other than that, I've had so many experiences. Probably my happiest experience was actually when I was leading volunteers and giving them opportunities. I remember I was organizing a big event and we were bringing in speakers from out of town. And one of the speakers was kind of a hero of one of the volunteers who was working for me. And so rather than me go to the airport and pick this guy up, I sent Joe. And he had an hour and a half of one-on-one time with his hero, right? And he still talks about this is 20 years ago. So it's things like that really make it special. Working as a volunteer, helping volunteers, there is no better job than mine. Because I help people help other people. Right?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
That's really heartwarming. Thank you so much, Karen, for telling me all about the wonders of volunteering and what volunteering can do for you. This conversation has been so much more fulfilling and engaging than I thought it ever could. Not that I thought it was going to be mundane or anything, but more of just like it really exceeded my expectations as to what I was going to learn from it. So thank you so much for bringing your infectious enthusiasm for volunteering to our podcast. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
My website has a ton of blogs. I focus most of my writing on organizations because those are the people that I serve are volunteer coordinators or leaders of volunteers. But there is information in there about volunteering in general. I'm in Canada. I'm in British Columbia, Canada, about 3 hours from Vancouver. My website is karenknight.ca.
karenknight.ca. We'll link it in the show notes so you can't miss it. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pe.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.